Hola, hola, ¿cómo están? Muchas gracias por acompañarme. Yo soy Santiago Escamilla y el día de hoy toca hablar de los jugadores más valiosos del draft de la NFL y para eso tengo un invitado de lujo. Me va a tocar sacar el Spanglish de nuevo. Está Max Chadwick conmigo de el PFF College Football Show. Max, thank you very much for being here with me. We're going to talk about the offensive line in this year's draft class. I think it's a very deep class, but it's a very misunderstood class. For some reason, everyone is talking about the size of their arms, stuff like that, and they're not talking enough about the players. So I wanted to invite you over so that we could talk about the consensus 100 players in the offensive line. Thank you very much for being here.
Of course, Santiago, thanks for having me on, man. And yeah, you're right. I think a lot of people would kind of just look at an offensive lineman and look at purely his arm length and wonder, okay, that's the only thing that matters when projecting a guy to the NFL. It's more than that, like you just said right there, too. So I think it's going to be a fun conversation we have today about some of these offensive linemen.
And to start this off, I wanted to talk about a couple of standouts. They're my favorite players at each position in the offensive line: the best tackle, the best interior offensive line, and the best center for me specifically. So we'll start with a game that I sometimes like to play with our guests called ¿Quién es ese Pokémon?
¿Quién es ese Pokémon?
So we will start with this player. He is number one in pass blocking efficiency in obvious pass situation, true pass situation, among all offensive linemen in the Power 5.
Okay, good question. I am gonna go with, I'm gonna go with Kelvin Banks Jr. here. I think he's up there in true passes especially, so I'm going to go with him here. I'm also thinking about Tate Ratledge too. I don't know if it's a tackle or a guard you're going with here, but I'm going to go with Kelvin Banks Jr. as my first guess there.
You almost got it, especially because of the Georgia part, but it wasn't either one of them. It was your number one center, actually, Jared Wilson.
Okay.
He was number one in pass blocking efficiency. They were all really close, like 99.7, 99.4. It's essentially the same grade, but Jared Wilson was number one. I think he's the best true center in this class, someone who's not being talked about a lot. And it surprises me because most people have someone like Ray Sable, for example, as their number one center, who hasn't played a snap there, or Marcus Mbow, even from Purdue. There's a lot of projection for me. So I wanted to ask you about Jared Wilson. He was the number one center. I think you didn't get to put him in the top 10 when you do the top 10 in the Pro Football Focus College Football Show, but you gave him a shout out, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like him a lot. Yeah, he's only a one-year starter, obviously, after taking over for Cedric Van Prank Granger, who was a very, very good player at Georgia last year. But he has all the movement skills that you'd want for a center in the NFL. Not the most strongest player overall, but I think this guy is just getting started, honestly. And like you said before, you seen that stat right there. He was outstanding in his first year as a starter for Georgia. I think he could be a long-term center in the NFL in a zone blocking scheme. And yeah, I agree with you. I think he is. Of all the guys in this center class, there's a lot of guys you're projecting the center that haven't played it before. He is the best pure center, I think, in this draft class, and I would take him somewhere probably at day 2 of the draft.
Yeah, how high in the day 2? Maybe top 50 or more like in the third round?
I think more in the third round. Yeah, top 50 might be a little rich for a center. Like, you got to be a really, really special one to go in the top 50. I expect Jared Wilson to go probably early third round if I had to make a prediction right now.
Early third round. Do you agree with this, that there are 6 interior offensive linemen who are better than him? Because I'm showing the consensus Big Bird, and Jared Wilson is the 6th ranked interior offensive lineman. Do you agree with?
It's tough. Yeah, I'm looking at it right now too. Like Ray Zabel and Tyler Booker, those guys might be first round picks, so I could see them going over him. Where did I have Jared Wilson? I actually had Jared Wilson number 4. I had him behind Wyatt Milam, Tyler Booker, and Donovan Jackson. I had him behind. So I like Jared Wilson a lot. And like I said, I think those 3 guys ahead of him are all guards probably in the NFL. So if you're looking for a center in this draft, I think Jared Wilson is probably the best one.
I wanted to ask you, I have these categories. Day 1 with starter potential, solid starter in the right scheme, backup with potential, and solid rotational piece. You already said he's probably the best center in this class. Where would you rank him in these categories?
I'd probably say solid starter in the right scheme. I do think he's a guy that you would put in a zone blocking scheme and he'd be really good, like I said, with his excellent movement skills. I don't know if he has a strength to work in a gap blocking scheme. And like I said before, he's kind of inexperienced right now. So you're kind of hoping maybe you go in there, you draft him in the 3rd round. Maybe he starts right away from you. Maybe he comes off the bench for you later on. I think he's not a day one starter, but I absolutely expect him to be a starter at least some point in his long-term career.
You mentioned that he's better in a zone blocking scheme. Is there another center for a gap scheme that you think would have a similar grade, but it just depends on the scheme?
It's actually tough because this is a center class that I think is not great. Because you're looking at it right now, there's a lot of guards that you see in the NFL in this draft. So I think maybe Seth McLaughlin. I think he's a little stronger. I think he might be able to work in a gap blocking scheme. I'm not a huge fan of Seth McLaughlin either, though. So I don't really know about that. Maybe Jonah Monheim. I think he might be able to work in a gap scheme too. So that could be tough. Maybe Willie Lampkin. I know he's kind of a little smaller player, so you probably want him on the move though. So that's a tough one. Like I said, it's not a great center class, so it's hard to pick out one guy for a gap scheme when most of these guys in the interior line class are mainly guards, I think, in the NFL.
Okay, so Jared Wilson is the true number one. There isn't anyone else in consideration.
No, not for a pure center. Now, there's some people who think that Gray Zabel or Marcus Mbo or someone else can play center in the NFL. If they do that, maybe you'd like them a little bit more. I still think Jared Wilson's a little bit better than both those guys. So, but yeah, I think Jared Wilson, again, for guys who actually played center in college, I think he's pretty easily the best one for the NFL draft.
I agree with that, and it makes me happy that we agree with this. I feel validated in a sense. But then we can move on to the next player in this little game called ¿Quién es este Pokémon?
¿Quién es ese Pokémon?
So we move from Jared Wilson to an offensive lineman who only allowed one quarterback pressure, no quarterback hits, no sacks in true pass situations, but he only played 158 snaps in that situation because of an injury.
I think this is pretty easy for me. I'd be surprised if I got this wrong. I'm gonna go Josh Simmons here. I know he was excellent this past year in the limited time that we saw from him, and I think he had the lowest pressure rate allowed in college football. But like you said before, he only played 6 games or so. So yeah, Josh Simmons. All right, I got that one right. I feel a little bit better now.
Yes, you got that one right. I wanted to ask you, Josh Simmons, for me, if he was healthy, he would be the number one tackle. I know you like Kelvin Banks Jr. a lot, so we'll get to him. But is this true for you as well? Is Josh Simmons the best tackle if the medical checks out? Or is there maybe some doubt because he only has 1 year of production and it's not even a whole year. He got injured very quickly. And I remember that when you were talking about him, you mentioned that his stats are a bit misleading because he played against a lower level of competition. Even at Ohio State, he never faced a true number one pass rusher or anything like that. So he's good, but maybe not the best offensive tackle for you?
No, I have him actually. I'm lower than a lot of people on Josh Simmons. I have him OT5 in this draft. Now, I get it. The tools are there. The movement ability is there. But the injury is questionable at best, right? So you have those concerns. And also, I mean, with his tape, yeah, he was really good this past year. But like you said, I mean, he played Akron, Western Michigan, Marshall, Michigan State, Iowa, and then he played like a little bit of the Oregon game before going down with that injury. So even that Marshall game, you might think, oh, we went against Mike Green and he performed well. He only played 1 snap against Mike Green. Mike Green actually lined up against the right tackle a lot in that game. So really, really easy competition he played this past season. And I thought the year before, he was an okay player overall, very, very up and down. Even the year before that at San Diego State, he actually had a rough year that year too. I think Josh Simmons is way more of a boomer bust prospect than a lot of other people think in this draft. So he's OT5 for me. And honestly, Kelvin Banks Jr., Will Campbell, Armand Membu, and Josh Connerly, they're have a pretty sizable gap, I think, between those guys and Josh Simmons. I'm not the biggest Josh Simmons fan right now.
What do you think he needs to improve on to maybe get closer to the top 4 players that you mentioned?
Yeah, obviously, coming off the injury, it's going to be questionable if he can keep those movement skills that he had before, because that's really what you love about him is that movement ability. I don't think he's the strongest player right now either. I think it's where he kind of gets to some problems right now. So I think that's probably a problem, and I just think he's a little inexperienced and hasn't really proven, to be a top flight player against top flight competition like some other guys in this class have. So again, all the tools that you look for, he's very flexible, he has good leverage, he has good foot speed and balance. But I just don't know if I want to trust that guy as my franchise left tackle in the top 15 to 20 picks, like a lot of other people would. I think he's way more of a boom or bust prospect than a lot of people think.
I really like him, but the consensus seems to agree with you because he's the fourth ranked offensive tackle, and you even have Josh Connolly Jr. ahead of him. Where would you rank him among these categories? Do you think he's a day one starter, or if he's healthy, or not even that? Maybe more of a project.
I think, yeah, I would put him in the second category as well. I would say he's the guy in a right scheme. I would like him in. Maybe you trust him out there as a day one starter, but like I said before, you're probably drafting him to be a day one starter if you're taking him in the first round, which is probably where he's going to go on draft night, I would imagine. But at the same time, I don't really feel comfortable saying that. I'd more take a second round pick on him, and I know that's kind of a hot take for a lot of people. But yeah, I would say he's probably a guy that in the right scheme could start, and I would prefer him not to play immediately, but he's probably going to be drafted into a situation where he's going to be playing pretty quickly.
And compared to the other players that you already mentioned, where would you put them? Are they once starters with star potential, or maybe more solid rotational pieces? They can start, but maybe not become great players at that position.
Yeah, I would say Will Campbell. I would say Kelvin Banks, Will Campbell, and Armand Membu are in the day one category. I think all three of those guys are pretty much plug and play in the NFL. Josh Connolly Jr. I probably put in the second category with Josh Simmons. Why? I think he's closer to Josh Simmons than those other three are. So that's how I would probably group it right there. But I really like Kelvin Banks Jr., Will Campbell, and Armand Membu. I'd have no problem taking all three of those guys in the top 15 picks of the draft.
And I wanted to ask you specifically about Will Campbell. There he is with his little T-Rex arms. Is he more of a tackle or more of a guard for you?
I would try him at tackle and let him fail at tackle first before you automatically put him in at guard. And I think he'd be an all-pro caliber guard or even center. I think he can play all five positions in the offensive line, honestly. But he was so good at tackle, and honestly, the only people that really beat him in the SEC were the top-flight pass rushers. Now, of course, you're filled in the NFL with those kind of guys, but I think Will Campbell is a very clean prospect overall, and I would at least try him out at tackle first and let him show what he can do at tackle in the NFL before automatically putting him in a guard. And actually, his wingspan and his arm length that he came out with at his pro day was a lot longer than it was at the combine, which is the combine kind of messed up the arm length this year. It was a little weird situation with that. But like I said, I would start him at tackle, let him fail there first, and then say, okay, now we can kick you aside at guard or center. That's what I would do, at least with Will Campbell.
From what I understand, in the scouting combine, someone messed up, right? There was a scout who didn't do the measurements correctly, and he didn't want to accept that he did them incorrectly, which is why we have a lot of discrepancies from the Senior Bowl, the Shrine Bowl, to the scouting combine, and then to the individual pro days of every player. And maybe the biggest case was with Will Campbell or Jalen Milroe. They're magic. They can get bigger arms and hands in just a couple of weeks. But I know a lot of people talk about the arm size and the arm length. I think the wingspan is more important, but everybody mentions the arm length. So why do you think everybody mentions this with Will Campbell, but nobody does with Kelvin Banks when it's almost the same size?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because you mentioned the arm length is for Will Campbell, it's a little shorter, so like a half-inch shorter than Kelvin Banks.
But does it show up in the film?
Campbell sometimes. I think he struggles with power sometimes, and he lets guys get into his chest a little bit. Kelvin Banks' wingspan is actually well above average. His arm length is a little below average, but his wingspan is well above average. And like you just said, I like you put it perfectly. I think wingspan is way more of what you want to look for an offensive lineman than arm length. So I think that for Campbell, it shows up a little bit, but not enough for me to say, oh, he has to play guard. Like, there's some tackles in this class, like Wyatt Milam, for example, is like, okay, his arms are way too short. He can't even play tackle in the NFL because of that. I would think that Will Campbell deserves to at least a shot. I mean, 33-inch arms is below average, yes, but I mean, that's still good enough to play tackle in the NFL as long as you are clean in a lot of other areas, and he is that. So that's how I would describe Will Campbell, and I think he's worth a shot at tackle first.
Rashawn Slater also has the same size of arm, so I think it's a very over-discussed point, but for some reason you have to mention it because if not, everyone screams at you in the comments. I just think the pre-draft process is really funny because sometimes you have these little tidbits with a specific prospect that you have to mention or that become a huge talking point when it really doesn't matter. It's for me very similar to the patting the ball from Shadur Sanders Pro Day, which is like, what? That's not something I ever thought about when watching him. That's not something we will discuss with him when he gets to the NFL, but everybody mentioned that for like a day. So it's really, really bizarre for some reason. You really like Wyatt Milam, right?
Yeah, I actually have him, and this is a hot take. I have him as a number one interior lineman in the class. Now, I get it. He has short arms even for an interior player, but he was a dominant player this last year. In fact, I think he was the highest graded tackle that we had in PFF, and he performed well even against Abdul Carter's worst game last year was against West Virginia and against Wyatt Milam. So now that was his first game playing edge for Penn State, so maybe he just got a lot better. He did get a lot better as the season went on. But, I mean, the most issues he faced in his career, or at least in this past season, was against Wyatt Milam in West Virginia, right? So that proved a lot to me. I think he could be a really good guard in the NFL, and he could be a guy that can work in either a gap or a zone scheme. I like his moving ability a lot. He's a very athletic player, too. I'm a big fan of Wyatt Milam, and I actually have him as my number one interior lineman in the class.
He's a very similar player to Gray Sable and another college tackles who will probably kick inside once they get to the NFL. And he also had a really good week at the Senior Bowl, maybe struggled a bit at the start, but then he got much better throughout the week, right? I think this is a good moment to name another Pokemon. He's a very similar player to the one we've already discussed. So I wanted to ask you about, I think, the most versatile offensive lineman in this draft. Now, this player has recorded over 300 snaps in 3 different positions since 2022. Who do you think he is?
This is tough. Let me look at my rankings real quick.
He was in your top 10.
He was in my top 10.
Yeah, so okay. I'm not going to ask you about the 7th rounder from...
Okay. I appreciate that. Okay, let me look at my position rankings really quickly then and see if I can get someone here. 3 different positions. That's interesting. I mean, we just covered Wyatt Milam, so I feel like it wouldn't be him because I know he played a little bit of guard. Oh, is it? Oh, no, I didn't have Jonah Monheim in my top 10, but he did play that. Jonah Monheim would have been my guess there, but he's not in my top 10, so this is tough now. Is it Marcus and Bo? Did he play?
No, but he's another college tackle who's going to kick off inside. I feel like I cheated a bit because I mentioned him just before I put this. So I think you just said, oh, he's probably not Gray Sable, right?
No, that's good. Yeah, good call. No, that's a good call. Yeah.
No, but I love Gray Sable because, well, first of all, you have to be incredibly intelligent to be able to play 3 different positions in the offensive line, right? He comes from North Dakota State, which has a lot of prospects who have worked out the next level. I think he projects more as a guard, but a lot of people have him as a center. What position do you think he would be best at?
I would say guard. He can play center in the NFL, but I would think he's more of a guard in the NFL in a zone blocking scheme. I really like him in. I think his movement ability would shine in a outside zone blocking scheme, especially. I would say guard, Yeah, I would say probably guard. And like I said, he at the Senior Bowl, it was very impressive considering he was playing tackle at North Dakota State. They forced him to play in the interior at the Senior Bowl, so he's playing a new position at the Senior Bowl against competition that he did not face at the FCS level, and he still performed really well at the Senior Bowl too. So, I like him as a guard in an outside zone scheme, or as a center in an outside zone scheme too. But I think more as a guard long term.
When projecting a tackle inside, how do you say he's a guard, he's a center? What do you look for in a converted tackle to sort of put him in one of those categories?
Yeah, it's tough. I think obviously when you're looking for a guy to tackle, you're saying, okay, can he play tackle in the NFL? Does he have the foot speed to play tackle? Does he have the length to play tackle? That's really the two things I really look for. Like if you're struggling to get to the outside and contain a speed rusher, it's going to be tough for you in the NFL, right? When guys are even faster. So that's one big thing. You look at the traits first and whether or not he can stick a tackle long term. And then honestly, for some tackles, like it's even tough to say they can play guard. It's like, okay, well, if play strength is a major concern for them, you're going up against stronger players on the interior at D tackle. Could that be even a bigger concern for you too? So sometimes it's not always. I don't know. I think a lot of times people look at a tackle and say, "Oh, he's not good enough to play tackle. Let's just kick him inside the guard."
Can be a guard, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's not that, right? You're kind of looking at what a player is and what his strengths and weaknesses are, and saying, okay, well, there's different strengths and different weaknesses for each position, right? So, it is tough, and a guy like Marcus and Bo especially is a little tough for me too, because like you look at his movement ability, you say, oh, he can play tackle, but he doesn't have the length to play tackle. And then you look at him inside a guard. I don't know if he has the strength to play guard or center at a high level either. So he's a little tougher for me. I still like him a lot. He's still gonna be a day 2 pick, but he's a little tougher of a transition. So it is interesting. I think IQ goes into it a lot too. Like if you want to play center in the NFL, you have to be a very high IQ player because you're calling out protections. So I think a guy like Will Campbell, who actually was calling protections at left tackle for LSU, he's a guy that can play center at a very high level. So I think football intelligence is a big thing for centers too. It's definitely a more nuanced conversation than I think a lot of people think it is for the conversion from tackle to guard or guard to tackle, whatever.
The biggest thing that I want to highlight from what you mentioned is that sometimes I feel like people gross over like the how do you say limitations of a player, specifically when talking about like the hand size. If you're worried about Will Campbell against power rushers because of that specific thing, then it will only be a bigger problem if he kicks off inside facing bigger and stronger players, right? Do you think that would be an issue with Gray Sable, or maybe not?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think he's a guy. I like Gray Sable. I'm not as high on Gray Sable as some people. I think he's definitely a good player overall, and I'll take him in the second or third round. But first round where it gets to be a little much for me.
Ooh,
but
second or third round, okay.
Yeah, he's going to go in the first round. I think he's going to go even as high as, like, say, number 18 overall to Seattle. And I understand that considering, Clint Kubiak runs that outside zone scheme. And like I said before, Gray Sable is perfect fit for that. So he makes more sense for Seattle than a guy like Tyler Booker does, for example. But I like Gray Sable, though. I think he's a guy that I would think is going to be more of a guard in the NFL. But like I said before, play strength for him is a little bit of a question, too. So that might even be a bigger issue for him as he goes out to guard.
So you see him as a solid starter in the right scheme, right?
Yes, yeah. He's a little scheme specific. I don't know if I want him in a gap schemes. I don't think he has a strength to be good in a gap blocking scheme, but in a outside zone heavy scheme like the one that Clint Kubiak will run in Seattle, that's the one. That's where I really want him to shine.
So he seems like the complete opposite of Tyler Booker then, right?
Yes.
Because he's perfect for the gap scheme, and Gray Sable is perfect for a zone blocking scheme. Do you think they're at the same level of prospect, just different schemes?
A little, yeah. I think that's a fair thing to say. I think Booker's a little bit better, but he's a guy that is going to need to be in a gap scheme. So it's a tough conversation, but I think Booker in a gap scheme, I would like more than Zabel in a zone scheme, if that makes any sense. Because I have Booker a little higher.
You would take Tyler Booker in the first round, for example, if you're someone like the Chargers, a team like that?
Chargers, maybe. I think Baltimore makes a lot of sense at the end of the first round, too. I think with this kind of downhill run scheme they like to go to, he's just not a guy you want out in space. And I think Tyler Booker's a really, really good pass protector, too. So yeah, I like Tyler Booker, and I think he's a guy that in a gap scheme specifically, I think he's a guy that would work pretty well in the NFL.
Okay. I really like him specifically in that scheme, but I agree with you. There were some times where you saw him in space, like in a pool or something like that, and Milrow or the running back would wait for him to get there, which is not something that you want, right? So I agree with that assessment. From the players we haven't mentioned, I think the best one is probably Donovan Jackson. How high do you have Donovan Jackson? Because I see him as a very similar player to Will Campbell, with the exception that we have already seen Donovan Jackson play as a tackle, as a guard, that position versatility. We've already seen him be a very important player for Ohio State in their championship run. So, some people might say that Donovan Jackson has a better curriculum than Will Campbell. Because of that, would you agree, or do you think Donovan Jackson is maybe a step below someone like Will Campbell?
I think he's a step below. I'm not one of the people that thinks Donovan Jackson's a tackle in the NFL. I think he played in, right? Yeah, he could play it in a pinch if you need him to. Like, he reminds me a lot of I'm not comparing him to this guy because this guy's a Hall of Famer, but like Zach Martin, he could play tackle in an absolute pinch if you need him to. I think he's a guard, though, right? I think Donovan Jackson is a guard, and he played tackle because Ohio State desperately needed him to, but that's not his role in the NFL, I think. I think he's a guard. He's a clean player overall. I think he's a solid player, and he's scheme versatile. He's a guy that I think could work in either scheme. I like him overall, but I think he's more of like a day two prospect than one I would take in the first round.
So he's not one. You're not one of the evaluators who were forced to evaluate him as a tackle. You still see him as a guard, even though he finished the season as a tackle, right?
Yeah, only because they only played tackle because Josh Simmons went down the injury. Then the backup actually went down with a season-ending injury too, and they just had nothing else to do, right? They said, okay, we need Donovan to play left tackle, and he did it, and he did a good job of it against some really good defensive lines. Not denying that. So I kind of get it for some people who think he could play tackle in the NFL, but I don't think he's a guy that I would want as a tackle in the NFL. I think he's a guy that, as a guard, I think he could be a really solid guard in the NFL. He's a high floor. Don't know if he's a very high ceiling player. I like him as a guard in the NFL. I don't think he's a long-term tackle.
I see him more like a Joe Thuney type. He's a great tackle, a great guard, possibly an elite guard even. And if you need him in a situation of emergency to play tackle, okay, he's there. But that's not his role. That's not where he will shine. That's not where he will play the best. Now, it seems like the draft is filled with those kind of guys. Like, yeah, he could be a tackle, but he's a much better guard, right? Like, for example, the players that I'm showing right here, Jonas Avellania, Marcus Sembo, are some players who are looked at in that same lens. Like, probably a guard in the NFL, not a tackle. Would you agree with that, with Avellania and Marcus Sembo?
Yeah, this is Marcus Mbow. Marcus Mbow is a guy that has 32-inch arms, which is first percentile for tackles, right? So that is like as low as you can go for a tackle. He can't play in the NFL with, I think, 32-inch arms. And it's only 11th percentile for interior linemen, right? So it's a little bit better, but still well below average. So he has very, very, very short arms. So I think that's a problem with him. Going to the NFL, I don't think he's a very strong player either, which is going to need to be fixed if he wants to play guard in the NFL too. He's only about 300 pounds right now. So I would say Marcus Mbow is a guy that I think needs to play guard in the NFL, but he needs to up his strength a lot, which is something you can fix, right? You can't really change how long your arms are, but that's how I would describe him. Jonas Savaiinea maybe could play right tackle in the NFL, but I think he's probably better as a guard in the league. But I think he's got to get a little stronger. I like Jonas Savaiinea. I think he's more of a guy that I could see playing tackles. I think he's got the length to play tackles.
He's massive, right?
Yeah, he is massive, and he's built really well. He's got quicker feet than you'd think for a guy who's 325 pounds. But I think he's probably you just look at him and he looks more like a guard to me. But he's a guy that I think is a little more versatile. Whereas I think Marcus Mbow needs to play in the interior. I think Jonas Savaiinea could survive at right tackle if you needed him to.
He reminds me of a bit of Micah Yupari from the 49ers, who was also massive, also had really long hair. I don't know if that's maybe making me compare them, but they were both really, really big guards who stayed there and were really powerful in the NFL. Would you say he's a solid starter in the right scheme, or maybe he could enter as a backup with some potential and you have to develop him?
I would probably say solid starter in the right scheme is where I put him in. I don't know if I want him day one to be a starting guard for me, but I think in a zone heavy scheme he could be pretty good. So I want to go with solid starter in the right scheme.
And Bowie, he would also be a solid starter, or more of a backup with potential?
I think I would put him in the solid starter, but it's very close to being backup with potential. I think Marcus Mbow is a guy that I like in a zone scheme specifically because he's very, very quick and he's an explosive player. But like I said, there's a play strength concerns that you have with him right now. So I like him as a solid starter in the right scheme. I think that's probably where he could be fit.
Now, these players who are in the bottom of this tire chart are the rest of the offensive linemen who are in the top 100 of the consensus Big Board, or Luke Kandra or Holden Pierce, who I know Max loves, so I wanted to give them a shout out as well, even though they're not in the consensus 100. So I wanted to ask you, from the players that are still down here, is there anyone who you think could be a starter with star potential that we haven't mentioned? Like Holden Pierce, Ossie Chapillo, Anthony Belton, Charles Grant, Cameron Williams, Emery Jones, Luke Kandra, Tate Ratledge, or Ironte Ersery?
I would say the last two, Ratledge and Ersery, are two I really like. Ratledge, I would say, is a solid starter in the right scheme. I think he could be a really, really good guard in the NFL as a pass blocker. Got to get a little bit better in the run game, but he is more athletic than I thought he would have been testing out the combine. So that's another guy. And Ariante Ersery, I think, could be a solid starter in his zone blocking scheme too. I think he has good movement ability too. The rest of those guys probably would fit into the next category if I had to predict.
Ironte Ersery seems to me like the prospect that if you only grade the flashes and you only grade like the top end stuff or the high end stuff, or the physical traits, you could convince yourself that he could be a first round pick, right? Like I saw him and I thought there are going to be a lot of coaches who think they can fix him and who want to work with him. Is that too rich for him to think that he might go at the end of the first round or something like that?
For Tate Ratledge, I'm sorry.
No, for Ironte Ersery.
Oh, okay, yeah. I think first round could be a little rich. I think he's a guy I would take more in the second to third round range. I think is where he's going to go in the draft. So yeah, I would say it's probably where I would put him. I think he's a guy that, like I said, in his zone blocking scheme, you're going to like him. I think he's probably going to go in the second round if I had to imagine in the top 50 picks. So he's one of the better tackles that you're going to get on day two of the NFL draft. Probably maybe even the best tackle that you can get on day two of the NFL draft, depending on what happens with Josh Connolly Jr. So it seems like he's kind of going up and down between the first and second round right now. But I think Ariante Ersery is a guy that I like as a zone block scheme. He's a powerful player too, and he's gotten better over the course of his career. He's more of a guy that I think is probably going to be more of a second round pick.
Greetings to Eduardo Salamanca, who says it's great to watch Max and Santi together. And he says greetings from the thin and long land called Chile. So greetings from Chile, greetings to Chile. Tate Ratledge, I love him. I don't know if he would be talked about more if it weren't for the injuries. Do you think he could be maybe a first round prospect or something like that if the medical bill is clean?
Maybe. I mean, like,
I know it's a huge asterisk because he has been injured in every season he has played. So
no, but you're kind of right. You're kind of onto something there. I never actually thought about this before because his tape at Georgia was so good as a pass blocker specifically over the last even like 3 years. He's been an elite pass blocker. That's kind of what we're talking about with Tyler Booker. And the difference between him and Tyler Booker is that, like, Ratledge can move too. Booker's not really got you one out in space. So
agreed.
Maybe that's actually like an interesting call out right there. I think I'm with you. I think Tate Ratledge could surprise a lot of people. He's probably more of a third round pick in the NFL right now, but I think he could be a really, really good guard in the NFL.
I was a bit surprised because I follow college football like week to week, and I saw him play at Georgia, and he was great. And when Georgia didn't have him play due to injury or any situation, they were a little bit worse. But then the season ended, and everybody started highlighting different players in the offensive line. Nobody talked about Tate Ratledge, so I was very surprised there. But I think he's a really, really good player. However, once I saw that he had like the injury bug every year he played at Georgia, I thought I understood it a little bit better. But that's why I wanted to ask. Now, I want to give you a chance to talk about Holly Pierce and Luke Kandra, who are two players I see that you're higher on than consensus. So I wanted to give you the opportunity to shout out both of them. So who do you like best, Holly Pierce or Luke Kandra?
Okay, I'll start with Holland Pierce because he's
Okay.
a tackle. He's a guy that is another guy who is extremely scheme dependent. If you run a gap heavy scheme, this is a tackle that you're probably going to really like. If you run a zone heavy scheme, he's not going to be on your big board at all, I would imagine, right? So he's a monstrous player. He's 6'8", 344 pounds, 4-year starters at Rutgers, started his career as a walk-on, actually. He had an 85
Great
PFF
story.
grade this past year. He is a dominant gap blocker. He has overwhelming power, really good length as well. He showed off pretty decent lateral agility that you would expect for someone his size, and he was really good at the Shrine Bowl too. He's not the most flexible player, and obviously at that size, not the most fleet of foot either, but elite combination of size and length. He's going to be a steal. I think he's probably going to be a day 3 pick, maybe like a late day 3 pick. I could see him turning into like a Trent Brown type of player and becoming a starter for a team long term in a gap heavy scheme. And if you're getting a starting tackle in the 5th, 6th, 7th round, I think that's a steal, right? So I like Colin Pierce a lot, and I think he is going to be one of the bigger steals that we have at the tackle position.
I love the story for Holly Pierce because he was 455 pounds, which is incredibly massive, like almost a car, and in high school. And then he got slimmer and ended up becoming a really interesting prospect who's a draftable player and who you think has a future as a starter in the NFL. I like the comparison to Trent Brown because they're both massive. And with Trent Brown, I think the question has been how dependable he is in terms of being available, right? He's a player who I thought a couple of times might eat himself out of the league, but then he stayed, he worked hard, and he's become a solid starter for almost a decade. Now with the 49ers, the Patriots, now the Bengals, he has played a ton. Holly Pierce, I agree that he has that sort of potential. Could he be a franchise left tackle, like someone a team chooses in the 4th round, 5th round, and he develops into a really good player?
I think he could be a solid player. But again, like if you're, he's probably going to be a 4th round pick if I had to predict right now.
Yeah, there are no franchise tackles in the 4th round, right?
Yeah, right. Exactly. You're taking those guys in the 1st round. Like that's usually a position that is pretty good. People are pretty good at drafting offensive linemen. I will say, like the guys who you're gonna get as the top players in the NFL usually are 1st or 2nd round picks. Holland Pierce is a guy that could surprise people, and I mean he would fit in that looking at scale right there. He would fit in the backup with potential tier that I put right there because I do think he's probably gonna be a backup starting off. But I do think in the right situation, he could turn into a starting caliber left or right tackle for a team, I think.
Now, talk to me about Luke Kandra. I hadn't seen a lot of him until I saw your show shouting him out about 2 weeks ago, so something like that. Then I looked for some highlights because full disclosure, I didn't get a Cincinnati game. In Mexico, it's sometimes a bit hard to get those things. The first couple of plays that I saw from him, he just touched the player and the player was in the ground, like the opponent was in the ground. So he has very heavy hands. That's what I liked about him from his highlight tape. So what do you enjoy from watching Luke Kandra play?
Yeah, I think he's a guy that you want, and he's kind of the opposite of Holland Pierce, where you kind of want him in an outside zone scheme. He's a really, really good athlete. I think that's the first thing that really stands out with him is that he can move, right? So he's been a really good player at both Cincinnati and even Louisville when he transferred in from. Was really good at the Shrine Bowl as well. Really good athlete, consistent technique as well. Only one penalty in his career on over 2,000 snaps. That's something that stand out to me as well. Very clean player overall. Now, plays a little bit of high pad level. I don't know if he's the most powerful player overall, so I don't know if you want him in a gap scheme. Though you mentioned those two plays you saw right there. There is some of the highs that you see from him there, but
no, but that's why I asked, because you can see the highlights and think, oh, he's very strong, and then you see the game and it's
right. Sometimes highlights fool you. I think there is some power in his game, but I think he is probably the guy you want in an outside zone scheme because of his movement ability. Really good athlete, really good technique. And again, he's been a very productive football player across 3 years at 2 different schools in 2 different conferences. I like Luke Kandra. He's another guy that I think could be in that backup with potential tier, I think.
I agree with that in the limited view that I got from him. Now, with these 5 players, do you think they're all backups with potential, or is there someone right here who can be a starter from the day one in the right situation?
I'm trying to look at those res right now.
Ozzy Chapillo, Anthony Belton, Charles Grant, Cameron Williams, and Emory Jones.
I like Ozzy Chapillo probably the most. I think he's the cleanest player overall. Yeah, you could probably put him in that if you wanted to. The solid starter in the right scheme or backup potential. Cameron Williams is definitely backup with potential. He's extremely raw.
Why did he declare?
I don't know. I think this is a guy that probably thought he was going to. There's a lot of first round hype with him during the season, and then that's really kind of died down recently. So he probably thought he could have gone in the first round. I think he's more of a day 2 pick now. I don't know if I would take him in day 2. He's got all the tools you look for in a potential franchise tackle in the NFL. But his tape is so raw right now, and I think that's a problem for him. So if you're drafting Cameron Williams and thinking he's going to start day 1 for you, I would be very nervous if I was an NFL franchise right now. Emory Jones, a little bit the same way. He started for 3 years at LSU. Just still think he's a little raw in a lot of areas. He's probably going to play guard in the NFL too. I don't know if he can stick in at tackle. So he's another guy. Anthony Belton is another guy backup with potential I probably put in there. I like him. Probably a little bit more than those other 2 guys right now, but he's a very strong player overall. But I don't know if he's an immediate starter for you. And then Charles Grant's an interesting one. I'd probably put in backup with potential too. As another guy who going from the FCS to the NFL is going to be a big jump for him. And I think for those kind of guys, it takes a little bit more to make that jump than it does for a guy coming from Texas or Alabama or Georgia, for example, where you're kind of facing more NFL athletes more regularly. You're not really facing that in the FCS level. So I think Charles Grant is a guy that I'd rather, let him sit and develop for maybe a year or 2 before I expect him to be a long-term starter.
These are the type of players where you have to really trust your offensive line coach if you select them high, right? Would you agree with me that Cameron Williams has the most potential in this category, or is the player with the most potential, but maybe the lowest floor as well?
Yeah, that's how I probably put it. I think he has the highest ceiling and maybe the lowest floor of any of those guys. I just think there's still a lot to work with Cameron Williams, and he just was very up and down at Texas this past season. But there are some high highs, and those tools, or it made him a potential first-round pick for some people during the year, because you see the tools and you go, wow, this guy actually has, looks like an NFL tackle right now. But just the hand placement, the footwork, everything is just really, really raw right now. And it makes sense considering he's only played 1 year at Texas, right? It's not like he has 3 years of experience like Calvin Banks Jr., for example. So maybe after multiple years in the NFL, he could really become a really good player because of those tools. But like I said, it's going to take multiple years, I think, in the NFL for him to maybe even reach that ceiling that he's got right now.
After Jack Sawyer exposed him in the college football playoffs, I thought for sure he was going to go back. I really, really didn't understand why he declared. It seems like you don't either.
No, I don't. He could have been a first-round pick in next year's draft, too. Next year's draft, I'm actually putting together some rankings for next year for our mock draft simulator when it comes out after this year's draft, and it's wide open right now. It's not a very top-heavy draft. There's a couple guys I really like at the top of the draft, but after that, it's wide open. A guy with Cameron Williams with his tools, you could very much convince me saying, hey, that guy develops. He could turn into a top 15 pick in next year, right, if he really develops next year. So, yeah, I agree with you. I think he should have come back to school, but he probably wanted to cash in now and be a day 2 pick and, get in the NFL as quickly as possible. So I completely understand that, too.
as someone who watches college football religiously and who has a great feel from the players who are coming in the upcoming years, would you say this class is better than next year's class, or is it just way too early to tell?
I would say right now it's a lot better. I would say next year, like I said, it's so tough because I think the quarterback class next year is pretty deep, and it's going to be very fun to talk about those quarterbacks. So if that's what you're looking for, then I think the quarterback class overall will be better. But everywhere else, like the receiver class is wide open right now. I have no idea who you would think is wide receiver one next year. I mean, the two best receivers in college football aren't even eligible to be drafted right next year. So
they're 17 and 19.
Yeah, right, exactly. So I think that even the offensive line class, the tackle class, there's still a lot of raw players that you're seeing being mocked in the top 10, like Caden Proctor and Francis Mauigoa and stuff like that. Spencer Fano, who's a great tackle at Utah.
There is the Alabama tackle, right? The right tackle?
Yeah, Spencer Fano's the right tackle at Utah, but he's going to play guard in the NFL. I don't think he can play tackle in the NFL, so that makes him a little tricky. Defensive line class is interesting overall. There's a couple guys I like. The cornerback class is a little interesting too, but there's not any guys that you're looking at saying, oh yeah, that guy's a blue chip player. That guy's a guaranteed lock to be a top 10 pick. Like the only guy I'd probably say is Caleb Downs, and that's a safety, right? And so if the best player by a mile in your draft is a safety, it kind of says a lot about your draft. So I think 2026 class is going to be one of the worst ones we've seen in recent memory. 2027 should be one of the best ones we've seen because of just how many unbelievable true freshmen that we had in college football this past year. So I do think next year could be a little bit worse than what we saw even this year.
You can't have a great class without having a mediocre class. So it's something we need to go through. The reason I was asking is because when evaluating Caleb Johnson specifically, I got eyes in the Iowa right tackle, Gengis Dunker. I don't know if I pronounced his name correctly, but I loved him. So I wanted to see if you gave him a shout out or something like that, if you were high on him or maybe I was higher than you on him, because I saw him and I thought future first rounder.
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, he was one of my top 10 tackles in college football. I put out some of my rankings recently for top 10 returning players at every position. He was one of my top 10 tackles. I mean, he's got the offensive line mentality that you look for, right? The movement skills are really good. You got the mullet, too. The mullet is awesome. Got like a sick mustache. I love the look of Jennings Dunker. So I agree with you. I think he, in a wide open class next year, and especially a wide open offensive tackle class, yeah, he could emerge and become, and he was a very highly graded player this last year as well. He could absolutely emerge as a first-round talent next year.
Now, Max, you already mentioned that you have been working on positional rankings for the returning players to college football, and I don't think I would be doing my job if I didn't ask you a bit about that. So before we talk about that, I wanted to play one last time. Name that Pokemon. And it is to talk about the only quarterback. He was in your top 10 list of quarterbacks if everyone was eligible for this year's draft. So you compared the returning quarterbacks to the players who are available in this year's class. And I looked at the Pro Football Focus data, and I saw that there was only one quarterback who had a big-time throw rate over 6% and who had a touchdown percentage rate over 10%, which means that one of every 10 passes he threw were touchdowns.
Oh,
Who do you think this is?
Man, this is tough.
He was in your list.
Okay, I know he's got the highest big-time throw rate. It's a touchdown rate. I actually haven't looked at the touchdown rate that often. I'm going to guess DJ Lagway because I know his big-time throw rate is outrageous. But I don't know if he's got a touchdown rate. Is it DJ Lagway from Florida?
He's close. I think he's close in the big-time throw rate, but the touchdown percentage rate, that's a bit cheating because if you throw a lot of passes, it's obviously going to go down. So this player didn't throw a lot of passes, which is why I had to...
Oh, Arch Manning. Is it Arch Manning?
Yes. Yes, that is Arch Manning, yes.
That makes sense. Okay.
Correctly. Arch Manning, it seems like he's a very good player. I know he's only played 2 or 3 games, but he was literally the only quarterback returning with a big-time throw rate over 6% and a touchdown percentage rate over 10%. Do you think he would be first round pick if he was available right now. I know it's too early, but his last name is Manning, so he only has to not suck in order to be considered a first round pick, right?
Yeah, so we're actually on our show. We're doing an all-eligible mock draft on Monday, where Arch Manning's eligible to be drafted, Cam Ward, Travis Hunter, all those guys, and Jeremiah Smith and Ryan Williams, and so that's gonna be a really fun video. Spoiler alert: we have Arch Manning going number 1 overall. Now,
Going number 1.
yeah, I know people are gonna hate that, and I know I already caught a lot of flack for it. This is actually Dalton's pick, not my pick. I think
it's his responsibility then. Yell at him.
I probably make the same pick, but it's his responsibility. I'm putting it on him. But I already took way too much flack for that list I put out earlier. I think how I want to frame it is I think Arch Manning will be a better prospect than Cam Ward will be. I don't know if he's a better prospect. He's definitely not a better prospect right now, but how we're trying to frame it is, okay, who are going to be the best prospects whenever they declare for the NFL draft? It's kind of how we're framing it a little bit. So I think Arch Manning has all the tools to be a superstar quarterback in college football, and then obviously a superstar quarterback prospect for the NFL draft too. So I think he's a guy that we're very high on. I'm very high on, as you can see right there, the number 1 quarterback if everyone was eligible. I think when we look back in 4 or 5 years and say, okay, when we rank all these guys right now, who are the best prospects? I think Arch Manning, when he declares, will be the best prospect of any quarterback currently in college football.
Are you worried at all about his feel for the pocket? Because his pressure to sack percentage was really high. I think it was over 30%, if I'm not mistaken, if I'm not remembering incorrectly. But would you say that you are worried about that at all? Or is that something that happens because he has played 2 games and it will get better with time?
Yeah, I would say it's gonna be better, and obviously any kind of stat in for him is a little skewed considering he didn't play that much. So I think he's a guy that I don't know if pocket presence will ever be an issue for any Manning, honestly. So I don't think it'll be a big issue for him, but it's definitely a huge year for him next year. I'm very curious to see how he plays out.
But specifically with the physical tools, do you think he is better than every quarterback in this year's draft?
Maybe. Yeah, it's tough with Cam Ward. Physical tools, probably Jalen Milroe, but he's obviously raw in a lot of areas. I think Arch is very polished, and he's got pretty good tools too. He's by far the best runner at quarterback we've seen in that Manning family too, while also having the similar arm strength and arm talent and accuracy than those guys. So I would say physically he's probably at least close to the top of this year's class if he came out right now.
It seems like you're bullish in Manning, but also in DJ Blackway. So you have, first of all, you have Shedeur Sanders as quarterback 1 in this draft, right?
Yeah, it's by a hair, but yeah, that's how I would do it right now.
Would you take him with the first overall pick?
I probably would. But again, I completely understand why Cam Ward's going number 1 overall over him. Because I think Cam has a little bit of a higher ceiling than Shedeur Sanders. But I think Shedeur's floor is so much higher than a lot of people think it is. So I think he's QB1 for me. But like I said, it's a coin flip for me between the two of them.
However, if given the opportunity, you would take both DJ Lagway and Arch Manning over him, right?
Yeah, and again, that's another one where it's like, okay, if you're asking me to take these guys right now into the NFL, and they have to play in the NFL immediately, I don't know if I would take those guys right now, but which I know is maybe it looks like the point of the article, but I think it's more about, okay, when they come out and when they declare for the draft, how good will they be? I think DJ Lagway will be seen as a better prospect than either Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward when he declares, probably in 2027.
I have mentioned in the past DJ Lagway as the kind of prospect that fans think a team would tank for. Like they would intentionally lose to be able to get him. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. Now there's still a lot of things to clean up with him. I think his footwork is still a little all over the place right now. I think he's like one of the highest graded quarterbacks on deep throws and one of the lowest graded quarterbacks on everything else. You can see that article right there. So yeah, I think lots to clean up with him right now, but the physical tools are out of this world. Like I think he's probably got the best arm talent of any quarterback in this draft, in next year's draft, or even the draft after that. I think DJ Lagway's arm talent is better than all of them. That's the kind of guy that I'm looking at right there. So okay, yeah, if it clicks for him and he continues to he actually had a really good freshman year. I gotta remind yourself he's only an 18-year-old. But if he continues to develop his footwork and gets a little more accurate to the short and intermediate parts of the field, yeah, absolutely, this guy could be a guy that teams are tripping over themselves for in the draft.
I feel really bad for Graham Mertz because he was the starter and then he got injured. Lagway played, and from the first time I saw Lagway play, I never wanted to see Graham Mertz in another snap. But when evaluating him for my quarterback rankings, I ended up liking him more than I thought. Once I wasn't comparing him to DJ Lagway every single snap, but I agree. Lagway, he is very, very talented. What he does under pressure is also really interesting. I really like DJ Lagway as well, so I'm really excited to see that you have him number 2. But before talking about anyone else, I wanted to mention someone who's number 10 in your list, Nico Yamaleava. Just to finish, because he's in a very, very interesting situation right now. Apparently, he's holding out, or I should say holding in with Tennessee. He's looking for a new contract. It's sort of the thing that you expect to see in the NFL, but we've never seen it before in college football. Do you think there's a possibility that Nico Yamaleava ends up in another university for 2025?
Maybe. Maybe. It's very tough because it's so late in the process right now. I think he's doing this for more money, but I think he has full intentions to stay at Tennessee. I would be a little surprised if he entered the portal and went to another school. Now, for his NFL evaluation, that might be the best thing for him, considering Tennessee's offense is about as college-y of an offense as you can find, and is very hard to evaluate a quarterback in that offense.
Or a running back. Dylan Sampson is always playing against 5 or 6 man boxes. How do you evaluate them?
Exactly, and really they predetermine all of their throws in that system. There's sometimes where it was only one receiver running a route on some plays too, and it's very, very vertical based, and again, not a lot of NFL translatable plays in that offense. So that makes it difficult, but I mean, like I said in that article, like he has like Justin Herbert like tools, man. His arm talent, his arm elasticity, his arm strength, his 6'6" frame. He could run really well too. He's very athletic. He was actually coming out of high school. He was one of the best volleyball players in the country coming out of high school too. He's a very athletic kid. I think he has all the physical tools to be a franchise quarterback. The problem is you don't really know if he can be that, because the Tennessee offense just makes it so impossible to truly evaluate a guy in that system.
And I promise this will be the last question. I won't take too much of your time after this. But I noticed there is one quarterback not mentioned in your list that I personally really, really like. I would rank him right after DJ Lagway personally, who is Lanori Sellers. Why don't you have Lanori Sellers in this top 10? What is missing in his game to be considered among these players?
Now, I will preface it by saying I think Lanori Sellers is one of the more physically talented quarterbacks we have in college football, and I think I completely understand why you and many other people are very, very high in him going into next year's draft. I think he is very Jalen Milroe-like right now, where he's
yes.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I think he's raw as a passer. I think he's really raw as a passer right now. I think he's got to clean it up. Now he is all the arm talent in the world. He can throw it a country mile. He can run as well as any other quarterback in college football too. But the accuracy, the mechanics are a little Jalen Milroe-esque right now. It's just all over the place. So again, I think that's what held me back, and why I don't really think he's right now one of the top quarterbacks. If he develops that, absolutely could be QB1 next year. I have no doubt about that. But I'm a little lower on him because I think he's still very, very raw as a passer right now.
I agree with that assessment. He would need to enter in an offense sort of like Lamar Jackson, with that sort of idea to develop him, like you run a lot, maybe not pass a lot as well, and put him in a situation where he can do the things he's already good at while you develop the rest of the quarterback. But that's why I wanted to ask, because I really like him and I didn't see him here. So I had that question. Max, this has been a great chat. I really, really appreciate with you the time you gave me to talk about the offensive line, the rest of the quarterback class, next year's quarterback class even. We had a bit of a preview for next year, and you even gave us a preview of Monday's show, the mock draft you are gonna do.
Yep.
Where can people follow you in social media?
Yeah, I appreciate that. If you want to follow me on Twitter, it's at CFB Max Chadwick. And then, like I said before, the PFF College Football Show available on YouTube, anywhere you get your podcast too. Very exciting mock draft coming out on Monday with the all-eligible mock draft. And then a lot more articles coming on PFF.com as well.
I really, really think that your channel is very underrated because it's a great view behind the scenes at what the process looks like for grading the players. And also you have a lot of context, right? So I always learn something when I see your videos. And especially the mock draft that you posted this week, where you weren't able to select the players who are most often selected for each team. I think that was a great idea, and it gave way to a very interesting conversations, and especially new conversations, right? Because at this point of the process, everybody has thought about the top 3 players for each team, and it's almost like you want to listen to something else. So I really appreciate the content and all the work you do.
Thank you, Santiago. That really means the world, man. Honestly, it's so much fun meeting people like you who do this as well. And yeah, man, it's a lot of fun talking about football, right? So I really appreciate that. It means the world, honestly.
We really follow it in Mexico. So we really like the NFL. We really like college football, even if we aren't always able to watch, especially college football, because it's a bit harder. But Max, thank you very much. Thank you to anyone who stayed up until this time and who was patient with the English, because I know this is a primarily Spanish-speaking channel, but I hope that you liked this as much as I did. So Max, thank you. Thank you to everyone else. My name is Santiago Escamilla, and we'll see each other in the next video for most coverage, the best coverage in the NFL in Spanish. Thank you, and see you later.